Chapter 1. Introduction to Existentialism. 1.1 Defining Existentialism. Existentialism is a philosophical theory or approach that emphasizes the existence of the individual person as a free and responsible agent, determining their own development through acts of the will. In contrast to philosophies that emphasize the primacy of a structured universe or a predetermined order, existentialism posits that individuals create the meaning and essence of their lives. The movement is largely associated with certain 19th and 20th century European philosophers who, despite profound doctrinal differences, shared the belief in that starting point. The existentialist outlook regards human existence as unexplained and stresses the freedom and responsibility of the individual to make moral choices and develop an authentic mode of being. Existentialism arose in the 20th century, at a time when the horrors of World War I had undermined the sense of a rational and orderly world. Philosophers such as Søren Kierkegaard, Friedrich Nietzsche, Martin Heidegger, and Jean-Paul Sartre contributed significantly to this perspective, although their individual beliefs varied. Kierkegaard, often considered the father of existentialism, critiqued the then-dominant Hegelian philosophy, asserting that the individual's subjective reality is more important than abstract thought. Nietzsche, on the other hand, proclaimed the death of God and the ensuing need for individual re-evaluation of morals. Heidegger introduced the concept of being in the world, where he emphasized the individual's engagement with their immediate environment. Sartre, who popularized the term existentialism, adopted a vehemently atheistic stance and argued that individuals must confront the absurd nature of life with personal freedom and decision. Central to existentialism is the concept of existence precedes essence. This principle asserts that unlike objects whose essence and purpose are determined by their design, human beings first exist and then, through their own consciousness and choices, define their own essence. This is to say that humans, as conscious beings, are not bound by any predetermined essence or destiny. They are free to make their own choices and are responsible for the consequences of these choices. This autonomy of choice leads to the concept of anguish, a prevalent theme in existentialist literature and philosophy, which reflects the internal conflict caused by the burden of absolute freedom and the responsibility it entails. Another aspect of existentialism is the notion of authenticity, which relates to the degree to which an individual's actions are congruent with their beliefs and desires, rather than conforming to the roles, norms, and expectations of society. The existentialist views inauthenticity as living a life dictated by external influences, which diminishes individual freedom. This struggle to live authentically becomes a defining characteristic of the existential individual. Faced with a seemingly absurd or indifferent universe, the external pressures can dilute personal choice, making it hard to distinguish between what one genuinely wishes to do and what is done out of societal compulsion. Existentialists also explore the concept of bad faith, a form of self-deception wherein the individual denies their own freedom by adopting false values or denying their power to choose. For example, individuals may convince themselves that they have to fulfill certain roles or follow particular norms to avoid facing the anxiety that comes with the awareness of their freedom. This phenomenon illustrates how people might escape the responsibility of freedom by concealing it from themselves, thus eschewing the existential ideal of living authentically. The realization of personal freedom and responsibility brings us to the subject of the absurd, a term made famous by Albert Camus, although he himself did not identify as an existentialist. The absurd arises from the human tendency to seek inherent value and meaning in life, combined with the universe's apparent absence of such meaning. Camus argued that despite the longing for order, meaning, and purpose, humans live in a world that is indifferent to their search, creating a fundamental disconnect. He rejected the existentialist tendency of creating individual meaning, suggesting instead that one must embrace the absurdity of existence while defiantly continuing to search for meaning. The emphasis on individual experience and personal responsibility in existentialism leads to an interrogation of the idea of freedom itself. In this light, freedom is not seen as an unqualified good, but rather as a complex and sometimes burdensome state that demands continuous negotiation and entails the inevitability of choice. Every action we take is a testament to our freedom, and correspondingly, we cannot escape the weight of the responsibilities consequent to our freedom. This highlights an inescapable tension within existentialism, the celebration of freedom and the acknowledgement of the often overwhelming weight of what that freedom implies. Existentialism's focus on the individual's subjective experience has implications for ethics and moral philosophy. If essence does not precede existence and there is no given moral law or order, existentialists argue that individuals must fashion their own set of morals and ethics. This places a great emphasis on the individual's moral character and the authentic choices that define it. However, this is not an endorsement of moral relativism. Existentialists do not imply that all choices are equally valid. Indeed, the stress on authentic choices suggests that there are better and worse ways to navigate existence, with authenticity as an evaluative criterion for these decisions. Given its emphasis on subjectivity and the individual, existentialism has often been criticized for neglecting the social and political dimensions of human existence. However, many existentialists, including Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir, have engaged with social and political issues, arguing that freedom must be understood in a broader context, including the relations among individuals and the structures of society. They address the ways in which social conditions can inhibit or promote authentic existence, and posited that genuine freedom must incorporate a commitment to others and to social change. Existentialism is neither a philosophy of pessimism nor an embrace of nihilism. Rather, it is an honest acknowledgement of the complexity and ambiguity of human existence. It encourages individuals to grapple with the inherent tensions of living, to recognize the absence of inherent meaning, and to courageously create their own essence through authentic actions. As a philosophical movement, existentialism demands a rigorous personal integrity, constantly challenging individuals to examine their lives and to live deliberately, passionately, and sincerely. 1.2 Historical context and origins. The roots of existentialism can be traced back to the 19th century, with considerable precursors in ancient philosophy. However, it fully emerged as a movement in the 20th century. The foundations of existentialist thought are often accredited to the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard and the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Both men addressed existential themes of individuality, freedom, and the intrinsic meaning of life before the term existentialism was coined. Their work laid the groundwork for the philosophers and writers in the mid-20th century, who would come to be recognized explicitly under the existentialist banner. Kierkegaard, often regarded as the father of existentialism, wrote extensively on the subject of the individual's subjective experience and the complexity of living as a single individual in a world that imposes societal norms and generalities. His critique of the established church and his emphasis on personal faith and the leap of faith were central to his existential perspective. Kierkegaard's approach diverged from the systematic and universal philosophies of his time, focusing instead on the internal life of the individual and the personal journey of faith and meaning. Nietzsche's contribution to existential thought is equally pivotal, with his pronouncement that God is dead, starkly highlighting the crisis of meaning in the modern world. Nietzsche explored themes such as the will to power, the Übermensch, and eternal recurrence, which questioned traditional morals and values and encouraged individuals to create their own values through personal experience and self-overcoming. His work addressed the potential for nihilism in the face of the death of God, and the resultant loss of an absolute basis for morality. The term existentialism itself did not gain widespread usage until the mid-20th century, when it was popularized by French philosophers such as Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, and Albert Camus. Sartre, in particular, is responsible for explicitly defining the parameters of existentialist philosophy, positing that existence precedes essence and emphasizing the importance of individual freedom and responsibility. For Sartre, the lack of intrinsic meaning in existence meant that humans are condemned to be free, obligated to define their own essence through action. Sartre's existentialism was closely linked to his and Beauvoir's participation in the French resistance during World War II, as the struggles and choices inherent in their resistance illustrated the individual encounter with absurdity and the necessity of personal commitment. Moreover, the aftermath of the war brought about a newfound contemplation of human freedom, suffering, and solidarity, themes which resonated with existential philosophy and were starkly evident in Camus' notion of the absurd and his writings on rebellion and integrity in a meaningless world. The 20th century also witnessed German philosopher Martin Heidegger's significant contribution to existentialism, though he resisted the label. Heidegger's ontology focused on Dasein, or being there, examined the nature of existence and the human condition. His work on being and time analyzed the structure of existence and the inevitability of angst as a response to the concept of nothingness. Heidegger's influence was profound in terms of probing deeper into the meaning of being and the intersection between individual existence and the wider world. Existential psychology also emerged from philosophical existentialism, with figures like Rollo May, Viktor Frankl, and Karl Jaspers expanding the existentialist framework into the domain of psychology and psychotherapy. This involved an alertness to the challenges of living and the potential for neurosis in the evasion of authentic being. Their work highlighted the struggle against despair, the search for authenticity, and the embrace of freedom within the therapeutic process. Additionally, existentialist themes were explored in literature and the arts. Writers such as Fyodor Dostoevsky and Franz Kafka predate the formal existentialist philosophy, but explore similar concepts through complex characters and their interactions with society and moral dilemmas. During the 20th century, the existentialist emphasis on individual narrative and the subjective human experience generated powerful works such as Sartre's Nausea and Camus' The Stranger, which became fixtures of existentialist literature. The historical context of existentialism is further deepened by its opposition to other philosophical movements such as rationalism, empiricism, and positivism. Existentialists emphasize the intricacies of human experience that could not be fully explained through rational or empirical frameworks. By valuing the subjective and often irrational aspects of human life, existentialism positioned itself as a critique of the narrow focus on logic and science as the paths to understanding the human condition. Existentialism emerged out of a complex historical tapestry that wove together the insights of diverse thinkers, social conditions, and cultural movements. Its origins can be found in the recognition of the individual's struggle with meaning and the pursuit of authenticity in an indifferent or even absurd universe. Throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, existentialists built upon each other's work, deeply questioning the philosophical and cultural underpinnings of their eras. The culmination of these ideas formed a rich, multifaceted view of existence that continues to have a profound impact on philosophy, psychology, literature, and beyond. 1.3 Key philosophers of existentialism. Existentialism is a philosophical movement that emphasizes individual existence, freedom, and choice. It emerged as a significant cultural force in the 19th and 20th centuries. The philosophy is associated with a number of key thinkers who grappled with the complexities of human freedom, the angst of existence, and the search for authentic living. While it is difficult to precisely define existentialism due to its varied proponents and perspectives, there are several philosophers whose works provide the structural backbone to existentialist thought. These individuals approached existential questions from different angles, incorporating their unique perspectives and cultural contexts. One of the earliest philosophers to lay the groundwork for existentialism was Søren Kierkegaard. Born in Denmark in the early 19th century, Kierkegaard's writings focused on the individual's subjective experience of the world and the importance of personal choice and commitment. He introduced concepts such as the leap of faith, the notion that belief in God requires a personal decision that cannot be entirely substantiated by rationality or evidence. Kierkegaard's stress on individual decision-making and the inherent anxiety of existence makes him a foundational figure in existential philosophy. Friedrich Nietzsche, a German philosopher in the late 19th century, also contributed significantly to existential thought. Nietzsche's philosophy centered on the idea of the Übermensch or Superman, which is a model of humanity that has transcended conventional morality to create its values. His critique of traditional Western philosophy and religion, especially the concept of God is dead, challenged individuals to confront the apparent meaninglessness of existence and create meaning through personal will and power. Nietzsche's compelling critique of systems of thought that he believed undermined human vitality and creativity marks him as a central existential thinker. Another influential figure in existentialism is existential phenomenologist Martin Heidegger. He used a method of inquiry that focused on the lived experience of individuals. His magnum opus, Being and Time, delves into the concepts of Dasein, which can be translated as being there or presence and being in the world. Heidegger believed in the profound importance of examining how individuals exist in the world and confront the inevitability of their own mortality, a concept he termed being toward death. Heidegger's focus on ontology and the meaning of being placed considerable emphasis on personal choice and authenticity in one's life course. Jean-Paul Sartre, a French existentialist, is perhaps the most well-known proponent of existentialism. His famous phrase, "Existence precedes essence," encapsulates the existentialist view that humans are not born with predetermined roles or values, rather they forge their own identities through conscious action. Sartre's expansive treatment on the nature of human freedom and responsibility is exemplified in his work, Being and Nothingness, where he outlines his ideas on consciousness, nothingness, and the phenomenon of being for others. Sartre's assertion that human beings are condemned to be free, carrying the weight of their freedom at every moment, cements his position as a major existential philosopher. Simone de Beauvoir, a French contemporary and companion of Sartre, also made significant contributions to existentialism, particularly through her articulation of the philosophy in the context of ethics and feminism. Her landmark book, The Second Sex, interrogates the status of women as the other and argues for their existential and social emancipation. De Beauvoir's works emphasize the importance of one's own actions in the creation of the self and point towards the liberation that comes with the acceptance of the freedom of others. Albert Camus, a French-Algerian philosopher and writer, provided an important voice to existential thought with his notion of the absurd. Camus posited that the search for inherent meaning in the universe is futile, a concept captured in his essay The Myth of Sisyphus and novels like The Stranger. For Camus, acknowledging life's inherent absurdity could lead to a form of philosophical liberation, embracing the absurd and continuing to search for personal meaning despite it. The fundamental existential concern with creating personal value in an indifferent universe is keenly expressed in Camus' works. The Russian writer Fyodor Dostoevsky, although not formally regarded as an existentialist philosopher, influenced the movement through the existential themes that permeate his novels. His works such as Notes from Underground and Crime and Punishment explore the psychological depths of the human experience, freedom, the burden of choice, and the existence or non-existence of moral absolutes. Dostoevsky's characters often grapple with profound spiritual and existential dilemmas, providing fertile ground for later existentialism. Karl Jaspers, a German psychiatrist and philosopher, contributed to existential thought by exploring the concept of limit situations, moments of crisis that compel individuals to confront their existence and freedom. His works explicate the importance of personal decision-making in forging a genuine life, the communicative aspects of existence, and the role of transcendence in human life. Jaspers, like many existentialists, saw the individual's confrontation with the uncertainties of life as a necessary condition for personal growth and authenticity. Gabriel Marcel, a French philosopher and playwright, brought a Christian existential perspective to the movement. Marcel regarded human existence as an intrinsically social act, imbued with mystery and the potential for communion and fidelity. His investigations into the nature of relationships, hope, and love counterbalanced the sometimes bleak outlook of other existential thinkers, asserting that amidst existential solitude, there is opportunity for profound connection and affirmation of life. Finally, the existential themes found within the work of Miguel de Unamuno, a Spanish essayist, novelist, and philosopher, underscored the tension between the desire for immortality and the acceptance of mortality. Unamuno's quest for authentic faith and his exploration of the struggle for meaning in the face of life's inevitable end resonate with existentialist concerns about authenticity and the human condition. His expressive, passionate writing style offered a deeply personal reflection on existential angst and the search for existential fulfillment. The rich tapestry of existentialist thought is woven through the contributions of these and other thinkers. Existentialist philosophers have not provided a unified doctrine, but rather a set of lenses through which individuals can explore the profound questions concerning human existence, freedom, and the meaning of life. The diverse perspectives offered by these key philosophers illustrate the complexity and depth that mark existential philosophy as a distinct and influential intellectual tradition. 1.4 Fundamental Themes. Existentialism is a philosophical movement that emerged primarily in the 19th and 20th centuries, and it has as its main focus the individual's existence, freedom, and choice as core components of human nature. This section will highlight the fundamental themes inherent in existentialist philosophy, which include the concepts of existence preceding essence, the absurd, freedom and responsibility, alienation and authenticity, and despair. One of the central tenets of existentialism is the assertion that existence precedes essence. This concept radically inverts the traditional philosophical stance that the essence or nature of a thing is more fundamental than its existence. In existentialism, this principle implies that humans are not born with a predetermined purpose, rather, they create their own essence through actions and choices. Human beings come into the world without a given essence and only define themselves in the way they live and make choices. This idea positions human existence as the starting point for any discourse on meaning and purpose. The theme of the absurd plays a pivotal role in existential thought, particularly in the work of Albert Camus. The absurd arises from the conflict between the human desire for order, meaning, and clarity on the one hand, and the chaotic, indifferent, and often incomprehensible universe on the other. This confrontation leaves individuals with a sense of disorientation and confusion in a world that appears to lack inherent purpose or meaning. Despite this, existentialists argue that individuals must confront this absurdity without resorting to false hope or suicide. The challenge, then, is to live with honesty and integrity, fully aware of the absurdity of existence. Freedom and responsibility are inseparably linked within existentialism. Freedom is considered as the defining characteristic of human beings in the sense that they can choose their actions and define their future. However, with this freedom comes the weight of responsibility for the consequences of these choices. Existentialists emphasize that individuals cannot escape this responsibility without self-deception or bad faith. Thus, the acknowledgement of one's freedom is an acknowledgement of the responsibility one has over one's life and the world. This concept demands that every choice must be made in the full consciousness of its implications. Alienation and authenticity are key concerns in existentialism. Individuals experience alienation when they feel disconnected from themselves, from others, or from the world at large. This often results from living inauthentically, that is, by conforming to societal norms and expectations rather than pursuing one's true desires and beliefs. In contrast, authenticity involves living in accordance with one's own values, despite external pressures. This requires self-awareness and the courage to face the anxiety of making choices that do not align with the norm. Authentic existence is a process of constant self-realization and self-creation. Despair is an emotion often associated with existentialism, but it is not an end in itself, rather, it is considered an impetus for personal growth. Despair arises from confronting the realities of human limitations and the inevitability of death. Instead of a crippling force, despair can be a catalyst for reaffirming one's commitment to life. It challenges individuals to find and assert their freedom and to create meaning, despite life's inherent meaninglessness. The concept of the other is another theme found in existentialism, particularly in the philosophy of Jean-Paul Sartre. The realization that other individuals exist as free agents with their own perspectives can lead to a sense of objectification, where one feels seen and judged. This interplay between self and other is a constant negotiation of freedom, forcing individuals to recognize the ambiguity in their relationships with others. In addition to human relationships, existentialism also grapples with the individual's relationship to time. Time is seen as both a limitation, through the acknowledgement of mortality, and as an opportunity for action and change. The existential emphasis on choice places importance on the present moment, the instant in which decisions are made and action is taken, influencing both the present and the future. This temporal perspective emphasizes the transient, temporal nature of existence and the role of the individual as the creator of their own life narrative. Anxiety, or angst, is also a recurring theme in existentialism. This form of anxiety is not the fear of a specific object, but a generalized, deep-seated condition arising from the recognition of the vast range of possibilities and the unpredictability of outcomes inherent in human freedom. It is not something to be eradicated, but understood and embraced as an indication of human freedom and the reality of choice. In this way, anxiety is seen as a motivational force, urging individuals towards self-awareness and purposeful action. The theme of death occupies a central place in existential thought. Existentialists address the inevitability of death and its implications for living a meaningful life. They argue that an awareness of death intensifies the significance of each choice and action, as death provides the ultimate limit to existence. Facing up to the reality of death is thus integral to leading an authentic life, as it highlights the urgency and the importance of making genuine personal choices. Finally, existentialism explores the notion of values and morality. Existentialist philosophers often maintain that values are not objective or external, they are chosen and created by individuals. From this perspective, moral choices are deeply personal and subject to individual creation rather than adherence to a universal moral code. This places a significant burden on individuals to determine their own values and live by them consistently. In the absence of objective standards, the existential ethic becomes a personal quest for meaning through the exercise of freedom and the assumption of personal responsibility. 1.5. Existentialism versus nihilism. To understand existentialism, it is instructive to contrast it with nihilism, as both philosophies explore the meaning of life and our place in the universe, but reach different conclusions. In the broadest sense, nihilism is the belief that life is without objective meaning, purpose, or intrinsic value. Those who adhere to nihilism often argue that there is no real significance to human existence, and that the absence of a higher power or destiny leaves a void where traditional values and beliefs may once have resided. Such a worldview can lead to a sense of despair or apathy, as it negates any overarching sense of purpose or order in the universe, making all human endeavors seem ultimately futile. Existentialism, while similarly beginning with the premise that the universe lacks inherent meaning, diverges from nihilism in that it sees this absence not as a dead end but as a starting point. Existentialists assert that individuals must create their own meaning within a seemingly indifferent universe. They believe that freedom and choice are fundamental to the human experience because, within a world devoid of predetermined values or truths, individuals are responsible for determining their own purpose and defining their essence through actions. This tenet of existentialism places great emphasis on personal responsibility and the unique experience of each individual, posing that authenticity comes from living in accordance with one's self-defined values and accepting the inherent complexities of life. The philosophical journey from nihilism to existentialism can be seen as a passage through a void of meaning, a space where traditional moral and societal structures have been stripped away. Nihilism recognizes this void and may dwell in it, either with passive resignation or with a more active deconstruction of existing narratives and systems valueless. Nihilism questions the validity of any imposed meaning, be it from religion, politics, or societal norms, leading to a detachment from systems of belief that are considered arbitrary or baseless by those who subscribe to this philosophy. In contrast, existentialism not only acknowledges the void, but seeks to fill it with individual purpose. The existentialist response to the perceived meaninglessness of the universe is not to succumb to despair, but to embrace the freedom that comes with the necessity of choice. Where nihilism may proclaim that nothing matters, existentialism posits, it is up to me to decide what matters. This shift is significant, as it turns a potentially paralyzing realization into a call to action for personal authenticity and freedom. A notable distinction between existentialism and nihilism is their stances on personal agency and action. Nihilism, especially in its extreme forms, can discourage action or commitment to values, since it posits that such efforts are ultimately inconsequential. This viewpoint runs the risk of leading to passivity or even paralysis by analysis, as each potential route seems equally worthless. The existentialist philosophy, on the other hand, puts a premium on action as the mediating force between the individual and their essence. Through action, the existentialist argues, one affirms one's freedom and participates in the ongoing project of self-definition. Another key aspect in which these philosophies differ is their approach towards subjectivity and objectivity. Nihilism tends to de-emphasize the importance of the subjective experience because it views subjective interpretations of meaning as lacking any ultimate foundation or truth. By denying both subjective and objective bases for meaning, nihilism can lead to a dismissal of all supposed knowledge or truth as illusionary or transient. Existentialism, while agreeing that universal objective truths about human nature are elusive, instead elevates the subjective experience. For the existentialist, the individual's perceptions, emotions, and individual challenges are of utmost importance since they form the basis upon which people invent their values and find their purpose. Ethics form another dividing line between the two philosophies, with nihilism casting a shadow of doubt over the concept of morality. If life has no inherent purpose and no action has intrinsic value, then the concept of moral imperatives becomes moot in the nihilistic perspective. Existentialists challenge this view by asserting that individuals are not only capable of creating their own value systems, but they are also morally compelled to do so. It suggests a form of ethical responsibility that is grounded in the freedom of the individual and the impact of their actions on themselves and others. In this light, existentialism encourages a self-made morality, a subjective set of values to live by that passionately affirms life rather than denying it. The concept of despair is integral to both existentialism and nihilism, yet it is handled distinctly within each philosophy. Nihilism might view despair as an appropriate reaction to a world without inherent meaning, perhaps even seeing it as a rational response to the absurdity of existence. Existentialism, while not denying the potential for despair, frequently positions it as a necessary step on the path towards self-actualization. Understanding the absence of innate purpose can lead to existential angst, yet this recognition is also what compels the existentialist to search for personal authenticity and live a meaningful life in spite of such knowledge. When discussing existentialism and nihilism, it is important to highlight the role of individual perspective. While both philosophies grapple with the lack of inherent meaning, they differ substantially in their optimism regarding the human condition. Nihilism can spiral toward a cynical view of existence, suggesting that since nothing has meaning, there is little cause for joy, ambition, or hope. Conversely, existentialism can be seen as an empowering doctrine, one that recognizes the blanks in our cosmic understanding as spaces where individual creativity and passion can be asserted. This positive spin on the absence of preordained meaning grants existentialism a more constructive and life-affirming stance. While existentialism and nihilism are both philosophies that confront the inherent meaninglessness of the universe, their ideologies diverge on critical points. Existentialism embraces the notion of free will and the importance of personal choice, suggesting that individuals are architects of their own meaning and values. Nihilism, more skeptical and sometimes cynical, denies the legitimacy of such constructions, promoting the idea that in a meaning-free world, traditional concepts of purpose and value are void. It is precisely in their response to this perception of meaninglessness that existentialism seeks to affirm life, while nihilism is often seen as a philosophy of denial or rejection. Consequently, existentialism offers a framework for living with intention and authenticity in the face of an indifferent cosmos, while nihilism challenges the very notion of such frameworks, advocating for a recognition of the ultimate futility of these endeavors. Despite their differences, both philosophies contribute to a rich discussion about the nature of existence and the human pursuit of meaning. 1.6 The existential view of human nature. Existentialism is a philosophical movement that explores the nature of existence and the role of the individual within it. One foundational aspect of existential philosophy is its view of human nature. According to existentialists, human nature cannot be understood by examining humans as if they were objects or by imposing preconceived categories onto human experience. Instead, they argue that the essence of what it means to be human is bound up in each individual's personal existence and choices. The existential view contends that humans are not defined by any fixed set of characteristics, but are instead constantly redefining themselves through their actions and the choices they make. At the heart of the existential view of human nature is the concept of existence precedes essence. This statement, famously associated with Jean-Paul Sartre, conveys the idea that a person's existence, the fact that they are alive and engaged in the world, comes before any essence or predefined purpose. Unlike objects which are created for a specific purpose and whose essence can be defined by this purpose, humans are born without any predetermined essence and must create it themselves through living. Through their engagements with the world, humans define who they are and what gives their life meaning. The absence of a universal human essence leads existentialists to focus on the notion of free will. They emphasize the freedom of individuals to choose their paths in life, acknowledging that each person has the responsibility to make choices that forge their unique identity. Existential philosophers argue that society's attempt to impose a uniform identity on individuals denies the personal freedom and distinctiveness that define human existence. This belief in individual freedom and responsibility also highlights the inherent anxiety of existence. By having the freedom to choose, individuals must also face the uncertainty and consequences of their choices without reliance on objective truths or fixed values. According to existentialism, human nature is not only individualized by the nature of free choice, but is also characterized by the ability to reflect on one's existence, a trait known as self-consciousness. Self-consciousness allows an individual to recognize their separateness from the world, and to understand that they can observe and judge their actions and being. This awareness of oneself extends to the acknowledgement of life's temporal nature. Humans are conscious of the passage of time and their own mortality, which informs their choices and pushes them to seek purpose and significance within their transient existence. Another key point in the existential view of human nature is the emphasis on authenticity. Existential philosophers believe that against a backdrop of societal pressures and expectations, individuals should strive to live authentically, that is, in accordance with their self-defined nature and values. To live authentically requires an individual to be honest about their desires, their emotions, and the motives behind their actions. An authentic life is one where a person does not succumb to bad faith, a concept used by Sartre to describe the denial of freedom through self-deception or the unreflective adoption of societal norms. The relationship between the individual and the other is also critically important to the existential view of human nature. The awareness of other people's perceptions can either enhance one's understanding of oneself or lead to conformity and loss of individuality. To existential philosophers, the other represents both a source of potential validation and alienation, reflecting our dependency on others for recognition and the threat this poses to our personal freedom and authenticity. This tension is what gives rise to the existential concepts of angst or existential dread, and the struggle for genuine connection and recognition amidst the plurality of human existence. Existentialism posits that human nature is also characterized by striving. This is the constant effort to make sense of one's existence and to seek out a meaningful life despite an absence of inherent meaning. The philosophies of existential thinkers often feature this quest as central to human existence. It compels individuals to confront the paradox of searching for meaning in a seemingly indifferent and meaningless universe. This search is not one that leads to definite answers, but rather one that is perpetual, evolving as the individual grows and changes. Existentialists also consider how human nature is influenced by the experience of suffering and the inevitability of death. They argue that humans naturally seek to avoid pain and death, yet an understanding of both is essential for living a full life. The conscious awareness of death, in particular, can act as a motivator to live sincerely and purposefully. Rather than seeing death as solely negative, existential philosophy suggests that it can help humans reflect on their lives, prioritize their actions, and live more intensely, with an awareness that their time is limited. The complexity of human emotions is integral to the existential view of human nature. Emotions are not seen as mere reactions to external events, but as fundamental to the experience of being. They are intricately linked to individual values and perspective. For example, existential philosophers like Søren Kierkegaard dissected the experience of despair to reveal its ties to personal identity and the overarching quest for meaning in life. Instead of dismissing emotions as irrational or secondary, existentialism positions them as key to understanding the depths of human existence. The existential view of human nature emphasizes the absence of an inherent human essence and the precedence of individual existence. It accentuates the role of choice, freedom, and responsibility in defining human identity. Humans are seen as beings who are conscious of their separateness, temporal existence, and mortality, yet are driven by a profound desire for authenticity, meaning, and connection with others. This view acknowledges the complexity of the human condition, with all its anxieties, uncertainties, and the pursuit of significance in an indifferent universe. The existential approach to human nature is not fixed but evolves with each individual's lifelong journey of self-discovery and self-creation. 1.7 Existentialism in literature. Existentialism, as a philosophical movement, extends well beyond the confines of academic discourse and finds profound expression in literature. The narrative focus on individual experience, choices, and responsibility makes literature an apt medium for existential exploration. Authors often explore the existential themes of meaning-making, authenticity, and human freedom, positioning their characters in a universe seemingly indifferent to their existence. These literary works do not merely recount existential philosophy, but bring it to life through the experiences and internal struggles of their characters. In existentialist literature, protagonists frequently face situations that reveal the inherent absurdity of life. Such scenarios force characters, and by extension readers, to question the nature of existence and the human condition. Through the medium of fiction, existential themes such as alienation, the fear of non-being, and the quest for personal meaning become visceral. The narrative journey of a character coming to terms with their existence can provide a powerful echo of the reader's own quest for understanding. One landmark author associated closely with existentialism is the French novelist and philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. His novel, Nausea, is often highlighted as a paragon of existentialist literature. It delves into the sense of revulsion that the protagonist feels in the face of a meaningless world, embodying Sartre's philosophical ideas on the nature of existence and consciousness. The intense psychological detail with which Sartre writes helps to communicate the weight and immediacy of conceiving one's self as a free agent in a reality devoid of preordained purpose. Similarly, Albert Camus, whose works are often categorized within the existential canon, utilizes the medium of literature to explore themes central to his philosophical outlook, most notably the concept of the absurd. In Camus' novel, The Stranger, the protagonist exhibits an indifferent attitude toward life, societal expectations, and eventually, his own death sentence. The book calls into question the arbitrary nature of justice and societal norms, asking the reader to ponder the meaning of actions in a world where rationality can often seem like an illusion. Dostoevsky, another writer whose work frequently intersected with existential themes, grappled with questions of free will, morality, and suffering in his texts. His novel, Notes from Underground, serves as a monologue for a nameless narrator who represents the antithesis of a heroic individual. His inertia and self-loathing challenge the reader to face the darker aspects of freedom, the capacity to act against one's own interests, and the burden of creating one's personal sense of ethics without reliance on universal truths. Furthermore, existentialism in literature has not been confined to the works of European authors. American writers such as Ernest Hemingway and Ralph Ellison have also addressed existential themes. Hemingway's sparse writing style in The Old Man and the Sea subtly presents existentialism through the protagonist's solitary struggle and quest for meaning in the vastness of the sea. Ellison's Invisible Man wrestles with identity and visibility, particularly within the context of race and individual existence in a society predicated on the categorization and erasure of the other. Exceptional literature often transcends the author's intent and philosophical orientation. Literary works that embrace the ideas of existentialism can profoundly affect the reader, who may not necessarily be versed in existential philosophy. The connection one makes with the characters, their trials, and the author's introspective styles can lead to a personal engagement with existential concepts. The intimate nature of this engagement allows readers to access these philosophical viewpoints on a deeply emotional level. The interplay between existential philosophy and literature creates a feedback loop where not only does literature reflect existential thought, but existential ideas can also be reinterpreted through literature. For instance, numerous post-war plays like Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot come to embody existential thought through their structure, dialogue, and setting, or often the lack thereof. In a world stripped of context and certainty, the character's search for meaning and continued existence despite uncertainty is a fundamental expression of existential thought. Literature plays a crucial role in the dissemination and elaboration of existentialist thought. While it can educate readers on the principles and tenets of existentialism, it also pushes the boundaries of how these ideas are perceived and internalized. Existentialist literature often employs a strong narrative voice and character development to dramatize the core themes of one's will to meaning, the anxiety of choice, and the acceptance of responsibility in an ambiguous world. As a result, literature becomes a vehicle for readers to confront and interrogate their own existential perspectives in worlds brought forth by words that mirror the complexities of their reality. 1.8 The Existential Crisis. An existential crisis refers to a moment at which an individual questions the very foundations of their life, whether this life has meaning, purpose, or value. It is a juncture where one confronts the deeply human questions about existence and seeks to find coherent answers in an inherently uncertain world. Often this crisis is precipitated by a significant event in one's life that causes a profound reevaluation of their personal identity, purpose, or values. Such events may include the death of a loved one, a career change, retirement, or a significant world event. Regardless of the trigger, the crisis propels a person into a phase of introspection and questioning. This questioning can manifest in a variety of emotional responses, including feelings of disconnect, disillusionment, and deep contemplation. During an existential crisis, normal everyday activities can seem pointless, and an individual can be left feeling as though they are without direction or a clear sense of self. The crisis often brings about a stark awareness of one's mortality, the passage of time, and the limitations of existence. Moreover, it may lead to the sense that one's personal and cultural values may not be grounded in anything objectively true or right. For some, an existential crisis might emerge out of a concern that life lacks inherent meaning. This concern could lead individuals to ponder if their actions have any lasting significance. Many might come to realize that societal values and expectations have previously dictated their life choices rather than their authentic desires or beliefs. Such insights can induce a state of cognitive dissonance where previously held beliefs are in conflict with new understandings, creating psychological discomfort. An integral part of addressing an existential crisis often involves questioning various philosophical positions on the essence of human existence. Concepts such as authenticity, freedom, and responsibility come to the forefront as individuals try to redefine their existence on terms that are sincere to their experiences. Examining the works of existential philosophers, individuals can find diverse perspectives on how to navigate the feelings of ambiguity and disorientation that an existential crisis brings. French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre posited that existence precedes essence, meaning that individuals first exist and then define themselves through their actions and choices. Thus, during an existential crisis, one might reflect on Sartre's ideas, contemplating how they have been living and what choices they have been making. It forces a confrontation with freedom and the acknowledgement that one is responsible for their choices and the consequences of those choices. Further exploration may lead individuals to confront the concept of the absurd, as explored by Albert Camus. Camus suggested that humans continually seek meaning in life despite the universe's inherent meaninglessness, which creates a conflict, the absurd. Engaging with the concept of the absurd can offer individuals an understanding of their despair and the futility they may feel, providing a framework within which to explore their crisis and its resolutions. Responses to existential crises vary greatly among individuals. Some may turn to structured belief systems or ideologies to find solace, looking for meaning through religion, spirituality, or political activism. Others might adopt an approach based on existentialist philosophy, taking responsibility for defining their own lives and adopting a self-made system of values and meaning. Addressing the crisis often requires developing a personal philosophy, a task that can be both daunting and liberating. This process includes examining personal beliefs, engaging in self-reflection, and potentially rejecting societal norms that conflict with one's newfound understanding of self. It is a method for charting a path to authenticity, where an individual seeks to align their external life with their true internal values and beliefs. In such an endeavor, creativity plays a crucial role, as individuals are tasked with reimagining their life's narrative and purpose. This can be an opportunity for a person to find new interests, activities, or paths that feel more aligned with their authentic self. Creating a life that reflects one's true self is a challenging but deeply rewarding process, often leading individuals to a more content and aware state of existence. Ultimately, through facing an existential crisis, an individual has the potential for growth and change. Although fraught with discomfort and disquiet, an existential crisis can act as a powerful catalyst in an individual's life, prompting them to discard inauthentic aspects of their lives and embrace a more meaningful existence. While answers to existential questions are not easily found, the journey towards those answers can be a deeply enlightening one, revealing much about the nature of human existence and personal fulfillment. An existential crisis, by its nature, compels a pressing and thorough examination of life. This kind of introspection can be unsettling, but also profoundly transformative. By grappling with an existential crisis, individuals have the opportunity to emerge with a renewed sense of purpose and a better understanding of what it means to live a life that is truly their own. 1.9 Existentialism and Religion. Existentialism, a philosophical movement that flourished in the 19th and 20th centuries, predominantly focuses on individual freedom, choice, and subjective experience. The movement's relationship with religion is complex due to its emphasis on personal responsibility and meaning-making in a world that may seem inherently devoid of purpose. While many existential philosophers were atheists or agnostics who often expressed a skeptical attitude towards traditional religion, existentialism as a philosophy does not inherently deny the existence of God or reject spirituality. It is more concerned with the human condition and the individual's search for meaning within it. At the core of existential thought is the belief that existence precedes essence, meaning that humans are born without any inherent purpose and must create meaning for themselves. This concept diverges from many religious doctrines that assert a given essence or purpose, determined by a divine power. Existentialism raises profound questions about the role of God in human life, challenging individuals to examine whether they derive meaning from divine authority or their own autonomous existence. This personal quest for meaning may lead to either a rejection or a reaffirmation of religious commitment on a profoundly individual level. Some existentialist thinkers, like Søren Kierkegaard, actively grappled with religious themes and are often associated with Christian existentialism. Kierkegaard believed that the subjective truth of an individual's experience was paramount, and he advocated for a personal leap of faith as part of one's engagement with the divine. Kierkegaard's version of existentialism did not dismiss God, but instead suggested the importance of an individual's relationship with God, free from the constraints of organized religion. On the other hand, philosophers such as Friedrich Nietzsche and Jean-Paul Sartre approached existentialism from an atheistic perspective. Nietzsche famously declared, "God is dead," proclaiming the collapse of traditional religious and moral values in the wake of modernity's embrace of rationality and science. For Nietzsche, this meant that individuals had to confront the void left by the absence of a divine moral framework and create their own values. Sartre, meanwhile, posited that humans are condemned to be free, carrying the weight of creating meaning in an indifferent universe without recourse to divine justification. From an atheistic existential viewpoint, life's inherent meaninglessness demands that individuals construct their own meaning and moral values. This process is deeply personal, and for some it may involve engagement with religious thought and practice. However, rather than relying on an absolute deity or sacred texts for guidance, existentialism encourages adherents to explore and develop an internally sourced set of values and beliefs. This does not necessarily mean that existentialism and religion are mutually exclusive. Faith, for some existentialists, becomes a personal choice rather than a universal truth imposed from above. The coexistence of existentialism and religion can also be seen in the way existential themes have been adopted and reinterpreted within religious contexts. Some theologians have used existential ideas to reinvigorate religious practices and to emphasize the importance of personal faith. By focusing on the individual's relationship with God, these theologians echo existentialism's insistence on personal authenticity and commitment. They argue that genuine faith can only arise from a direct and personal encounter with the divine, rather than through adherence to dogma or ritual. In addition to influencing Christian thought, existentialism has conversed with other religious traditions as well. For instance, the acknowledgement of suffering and the emphasis on individual responsibility in existentialism find parallels in Buddhism's Four Noble Truths and the concept of karma. Similarly, existentialist themes resonate with Islamic teachings about personal accountability and the striving for authenticity in one's faith. This cross-religious dialogue suggests that existentialism can offer a philosophical framework that fruitfully engages with religious ideas rather than outright rejecting them. For religious existentialists, the acknowledgement of an absurd or chaotic world, devoid of intrinsic meaning, is not a call to despair but to a renewal of faith. They suggest that the divine may be paradoxically discovered in the very struggle to find purpose, that an authentic religious experience requires the acceptance of uncertainty and the leap of faith that Kierkegaard espoused. Thus, existentialism informs a religious worldview that is rigorous in its self-examination and free from the automatic comforts of organized faith. Critics of the compatibility between existentialism and religion argue that existentialism's inherent skepticism and its focus on individual subjective experience conflict with the communal aspects and objective truths promoted by many religious systems. They assert that the existentialist ideal of creating one's own essence could undermine religious doctrines that depend on a collective understanding of moral truths and a divinely ordained purpose for human life. In conclusion, the relationship between existentialism and religion is nuanced and variable, contingent on individual interpretation and belief systems. While existentialism challenges the concept of a predetermined essence and urges self-created meaning, it does not, in itself, necessitate the abandonment of religious faith. Instead, existentialism can prompt a more profound engagement with religion, where faith is a conscious choice rather than an unexamined inheritance. It presents a perspective wherein individuals can explore the bounds of their spirituality against the backdrop of personal freedom and responsibility, possibly leading to a more authentic and individualized expression of belief. 1.10 Overview of Existentialist Ethics. The realm of existentialist ethics is intriguing in its divergence from traditional ethical frameworks. While most ethical systems are rooted in the idea of an objective moral order, with goodness and badness established through divine will, natural law, or universal rational principles, existentialist ethics turns instead to the individual to ground its understanding of moral responsibility. This grounding posits that ethical values are not intrinsically woven into the fabric of the world. They emerge from the choices and actions of individuals. Here, the subjective experience is paramount, suggesting that the meaning, value, and moral weight of our actions depend on the personal investment we give to them. To understand existentialist ethics, one must grasp the fundamental existentialist notion of existence precedes essence. Unlike objects whose essence or purpose is predetermined, human beings are born without any determined purpose. They exist first and only later define their essence through their actions. Implicit in this idea is the belief that individuals are free to choose and are thus responsible for creating their own nature through these choices. Therefore, from an existentialist viewpoint, individuals are the authors of moral values by the mere fact of their authentic choices and the commitment they bring to their actions. The ethical implications of this freedom can be both liberating and burdensome. Freedom, in existential terms, is not simply a matter of being able to do whatever one wishes. Rather, it is about recognizing the weight of one's responsibility in the face of this boundless potential. Each person must navigate through life making choices without relying on a predetermined moral code, and in doing so, they must accept the full responsibility for the outcomes of their actions. As a result, anxiety is an inherent part of the existential condition. Given the awareness of this responsibility and the absence of any external absolutes to guide one's moral reasoning. Existentialists like Søren Kierkegaard, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Simone de Beauvoir explore the complexities of ethical living from this perspective. Kierkegaard, often considered the first existentialist philosopher, grappled with the concept of faith and the individual's relationship to the ethical in the face of a seemingly absurd world. He suggested that personal truth and commitment to one's own choices are key in constructing an ethical life. For Sartre, the bedrock of existentialist ethics is authenticity, or acting in accordance with one's own freedom, and accepting both the ambiguity and responsibility that comes with it. Simone de Beauvoir took the principles of existentialism and applied them to the social reality of oppression and liberation. She argued that individuals are ethically obligated to not only assert their own freedom, but also recognize and support the freedom of others. In her view, oppression of others constitutes a denial of their freedom and, subsequently, a denial of one's own ethical stance. Beauvoir's perspective widens existential ethics from personal authenticity to include the dynamics of human relationships and the broader society. Another cornerstone of existentialist ethics is the concept of bad faith, a term Sartre used to describe the act of self-deception or denying one's own freedom and responsibility. Living in bad faith encompasses attributing our choices to external factors or societal pressures rather than acknowledging them as products of our freedom. Individuals may resort to bad faith to escape the anxiety associated with the burden of freedom, but Sartre insists that this is an unethical abdication of one's existential responsibility. Questions of what it means to live an ethical life, thus, become questions of how to live authentically, how to actively engage in the choices that define one's essence. This existentialist inquiry into ethics challenges individuals to live in a manner that is reflective and deliberate. Ethics, from this standpoint, is not a set of rules to be followed, but an ongoing project of defining oneself and the world through the exercise of free will. The role of the ethical individual in society, as per existentialist thought, isn't straightforward. While society tends to impose norms and expectations, existential ethics requires us to scrutinize and sometimes defy these constraints if they inhibit authentic existence. The ethicist, in this regard, is not a rule follower, but a critical thinker who constantly assesses the authenticity of their commitments and actions in the context of the communities they are part of. Since existentialist ethics dismiss the idea of universal moral values, each ethical decision made is inherently unique and contextual. Ethical wisdom in this light is not knowing the right answers, but understanding the depth of one's own freedom and the scope of one's responsibility in each specific situation. Existential ethics, being intensely personal, complicates moral judgments since it does not offer a clear method for resolving moral dilemmas. It presents the viewpoint that moral complexity is not to be solved, but to be lived through with awareness and integrity. The impact of existentialist ethics on contemporary moral philosophy and practical, ethical decision-making can be profound. In a world where cultural and moral relativism are prevalent, the existential emphasis on personal responsibility and authenticity presents a counter-narrative to both relativistic and dogmatic approaches to ethics. It invites individuals to reconsider the basis of their moral actions and the kind of person they aspire to be, making existentialist ethics not just a philosophical standpoint, but a call to personal and societal transformation. Existentialist ethics set forth a robust challenge to traditional ethical systems by emphasizing personal freedom, authenticity, and the creation of values through action. This view upends the conception of a universal moral order in favor of a more fluid, individual-centered approach. As we delve deeper into the study of existentialist ethics, the focus will be on examining how this philosophy is applied in the face of life's concrete situations and the moral challenges that arise from them. The succeeding sections will explore these topics further, elaborating on the principles here outlined and considering their implications for ethical theory and practice.